It's okay so far.
Yeah, we're live. Great. Okay. So here I am. This is Jody Dean, and I'm with Tim Sandars today. Tim is an entrepreneur, and he is a friend of mine. And yeah, I wanted to talk to Tim because Tim is becoming somewhat of an expert, or is an expert rather, of some descriptions in EMF radiation. And it's something that's obviously being talked about a lot now in the world right at this time, especially with this pandemic and everything, about the implementation and rollout of 5G and all the dangers, health dangers, right? All of that stuff, as well as everything else. We've got Wi-Fi and smart meters and God knows what that's out there. And I think it's just a really important conversation to have. And yeah, well, there's more to this story, obviously, because now, yeah, Tim will tell us and share what he has found and what he's doing. So I'm excited to, find out more. Tim, please tell us where you are with everything and maybe a bit of your background.
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me on your podcast. My name's Tim. I live in London, and I'm an entrepreneur. And a couple of years ago, I was at a conference in South Africa, and I met a scientist who was talking all about new energy, new types of energy, the energy of the future, which he called conscious energy. And I was watching him present about how in the future we could get into cars and we could say drive, and the cars would drive. And I was thinking, this guy's nuts. But it was really interesting and intriguing. Afterward, halfway through the lecture, he said, "Oh, and I've got all of the solutions to all the radiation problems in the world." And I already knew, and this was like 2 years ago, I already knew that was going to be a big issue for all of us, because
it's a bold claim.
Well, yeah, I know, right? It was a big claim. It needed to have some real sort of backup for that. But I got talking to him afterwards. He's a Serbian guy, and I said, look, I know how to funnily enough, I'd already seen products that claimed to harmonize radiation fields, and I knew how to test them. So I said, can I take some of your product back to London and test it? I tested it, and I was like, wow, this works extremely well. And that took me on a journey to understand why he was so confident. And it was because he has literally torn up the whole physics textbook and said all of the concepts in physics are actually upside down. They're all not quite right. So even to the point of things like concepts like opposites attract, he said that is just nonsense because opposites are designed to oppose each other. And it goes on and on. And so he introduced me to the true concepts of the atom, of gravity, of the laws of creation. He's even got a paper about the true value of pi.
Sorry. Go on. It's all good. It's all good. I was just trying to check on my Facebook on my phone what's going on, because people are responding, and I'm not seeing comments. So it's just Go on. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, we became friends, and I said to him, could I build a brand around your product? And so I did. My brand is called the Omnia Radiation Balancer. And long story short, because he knows the true concepts in physics, he can tell us exactly why a radiation field of very little heat will harm and adversely affect the spin of electrical current in our bodies. And that's very big news today, because we're about to jump from 4G into 5G with no concerns at all. And actually, as we're probably going to find out later, $0 spent on our safety testing. Zero. That's on something like a $17 trillion new network, which is something that we should be concerned about, right? Because you wouldn't get in a car that hadn't been safety tested, right? You'd expect the car manufacturer to test the car, you know, do some airbag stuff and whatever. And yet in Congress recently, there was a guy called Senator Blumenthal, and he stood up and he said to all the people from Verizon and AT&T and all the people putting this network in place, he said, can you just point me to where, you know, the safety documentation is, you know, tell me how much you spent, you know, what tests have been done and everything else. And they turned around and we said, we haven't done any. So that is the state of play right now. That is very worrying, because I know, having tested it on 4G, that the body responds. The body responds electrically to all of these, you know, very strong radiation fields, which are also electromagnetic fields, or, you know, as we call them, magnetoelectric fields. But we'll come on to the whole science about the atom and the electricity in our bodies, I'm sure. But yeah, so in short, I'm an entrepreneur, been running a business in London for 2 years. We've met at various conscious festivals and things like that, which I like to hang out in. And yeah, I've built this brand called Omnia Radiation Balancer, because harmonizing the body when it's threatened by all of this this crazy volume of radiation is important to me. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I'm so glad people like you are doing what you're doing, because I got interested more about all of this stuff since the advent of 5G, and and I started looking into it more recently. And there was a Guardian article that I posted on Facebook, which was the watchdog says that 5G is safe, and it was like, that's it, it's conclusive. And I was like, really? Is that so? Really? I don't know. Like, it just all seems like far too kind of, oh yes, you just can all go back to sleep now.
Blanket statement. There's no evidence to back it up. There's no look, you can, you know, I mean, look, in a fair world, and it's the same with everything from, I don't know, vaccines to anything, you know, anything that should be auditable. There should be kind of some public records that we can look at and say, fair enough, they've done all of these tests, right? That's fair, you know, and there probably would be in every other industry, whether it be making a drug or something like that. But for some reason, that is just not present in the phone industry. And that is despite the fact that there are well over 10,000 peer-reviewed studies on rats, which show that living, breathing creatures, animals like us, develop all sorts of very nasty diseases in their body when they're prolonged, they experience a prolonged exposure to this type of radiation. You know, they're showing up that they get DNA strand breaks, endocrine system damage. There's new types of diabetes that are developing because of the effect on the pancreas. I know from my tests that it actually impacts the blood. Just using a phone for 20 minutes impacts the blood. And we can come on to that later, because that's an effect that we reverse through our product and so on. What else is there? There's cancers, there's cognitive impairments, so memory loss and attention span. It affects your sleep, because the pineal gland doesn't shut down properly and secrete the melatonin if you have your phone next to your pillow, for example, because it sees the light of the phone and doesn't shut down properly. That's what the pineal gland does. It's always looking to see whether it's nighttime, and, you know, because of the circadian rhythms in the body, it secretes melatonin when it says, okay, Tim's asleep and it's 3 a.m., but it doesn't know it's 3 a.m. It just knows it's super dark. So the pineal gland, when you're asleep for a certain amount of time and it's super dark, secretes the melatonin. And when it sees a phone, it gets confused by the actual light within the phone. So there's just so many different studies out there that show, and I can point anyone to them. If you want to start, you can go to bioinitiative.org and just have a look. That's one consolidated paper of 4,000 tests, which show that even a very small amount of radiation exposure is causing disease in rats. And that is something we all should know. and we should all be aware of, because we have these phones in our hands all day, and one rat year is about 16 human years, right? So it means that we are at the moment sustaining an amount of stress in our bodies that over time will wear us out. It will diminish our immune system. And jumping from a level of intensity of 4G straight into 5G, which is like at least, the thing about 5G, it goes from one spectrum to a very high spectrum. But let's just say it's between 2 and 9 times as strong a field. To jump straight into 4G, from 4G into 5G without any safety testing on the human body or on a rat's body even, is madness. That is not something that we would expect to do in any other walk of life, or any other industry should not be able to get away with that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is of real concern, I think, for the whole of humanity, that these technologies are being rolled out and there seems to be little or no testing. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, it just seems so nonsensical. And whether we see this as a nefarious agenda or just cronyism or whatever, I mean, there's different frames that we can reference this in, and a technocracy, or part of a greater plan, or whatever, or just bumbling bureaucrats.
Yeah,
I guess we've got to find out.
I tell you what, let's be nice and say they've just got the wrong physics, right? There is a side to the trouble with every argument or discussion, shall we say, is that as soon as you go into that area where you try and point a finger and say that there's a nefarious agenda, the whole debate stops happening. It's just like when David Icke comes out and says it's all 5, CV is about 5G, and then suddenly you can't have that debate anymore because everyone's going, oh, he's a lunatic and everything else, and it completely we miss the chance of discussing something that is really, really important because of this inflammatory media sensationalism and whatever. But let's just be generous to the phone industry and say they've got the wrong physics. Because what I know about the safety testing that they used to do on 4G is that they take, and I'll explain exactly what testing they do and why it's wrong. I mentioned before that everything in the body is electric, right? Even me going like this is electricity in motion. Without our hearts, the biggest electrical pump in our body, without the pump of electrical current in our bodies, we wouldn't be alive. That's why you can be brain dead, but you can never be heart dead. And there are brain waves that are electrical. There's vibrations in your liver that are electrical. All of these currents are running around your body in an amazing orchestra, all sort of working together to keep you alive and to function your body. So everything is electrical in the body. And we'll come on to the true physics of radiation and the human cell a bit later, I think. But let's just take that as the baseline that we'll explain later. And the test that the phone industry does to ensure your safety, my safety, your family's safety, involves taking a plastic model of a human being with plastic skin, and they fill the plastic model with fake blood, which is constituted of something like sugar, a bit of salt, a bit of stuff that's fake blood, right? And then they get a phone and they push it next to the plastic skin, and then they see if any heat went through the fake skin and into the fake blood, right? So everything they do, all the safety checks or whatever that have been done in the past, have been all about heat. And there's one thing that's missing from that test. Well, there's 3 things that are missing from that test, right? A heart, a brain, and any electrical response whatsoever in the dummy. It's a dummy. It's not alive. And the point is that as electrical beings who are alive, we need to have some other test which shows that phones are fit for purpose and don't cause an electrical imbalance in our bodies, because that is what I'm here to tell you, that all my testing has shown that mobile phones and all forms of wireless radiation cause an electrical imbalance in the body, which over time can only do one thing, which is put your body under stress and therefore make you open to a disease, just as all of those tests have shown on rats. So, you know, being generous to the phone industry will just say they've got the wrong science. They're measuring only heat. They only think that radiation, they only think that heat, or shall I say thermal effects from radiation, can harm the human body. And what we're saying, and what the 10,000 reports on rats are saying, is no, there are non-thermal effects that are caused by radiation, and these need to be taken into consideration. So when you said that The Guardian, and I've seen it on the BBC, and I've seen it on Public Health in England, and I've seen it on all of these official mouthpieces, they all say the same thing, that there is nothing to worry about, and that all of their tests have shown that there's no danger. And I'm saying, what tests? Provide those tests, please. Show us them. That's fair, right? If they're saying this,
totally.
then that's fair. Show us what.
Show us the tests. Yeah. You have frozen. Oh, you're back. Good.
I'm back. Yeah. So
great.
Yeah, we were just getting into dodgy territory, maybe. I don't know.
Show me the money.
Yeah.
Show us the test. Come on, guys.
Yeah, well, that's fair, isn't it? I mean, this is something that every single person is touching, you know, putting in the pocket, next to vital organs, you know, next to a brain, you know, all of these things are happening. We've never held the electricity grid next to our body like this, right? We've never done that. Yeah. Maybe we had a Walkman or something like that in the 80s, but that was battery operated, and it was nothing like the power that we have on a mobile phone these days. If you get a radio frequency meter and put it next to my phone here, it goes berserk, right? It goes so, you know, especially if I download a video, because video is a lot of information coming into the phone, and a lot of information means a lot of radiation. So, you know, we don't know this. Most people don't know this yet. You know, they're just assuming that someone's done a safety test and given it a tick. They're assuming that, you know, we are blood, flesh and bones, and they don't perhaps appreciate how important it is to think of ourselves as electrical beings of energy, frequency and vibration, to quote a Tesla, you know, sort of a famous quotation from Tesla there. But that is what we are. That's what everything is. Everything is energy, frequency and vibration. Even this wall here is a bunch of atoms that are moving. You know, there's movement and spin in every atom and every cell. And as I always say, the difference between that wall and my body, which is also full of atoms, is that I have a mind that moves my atoms around. But also my body is, if you like, some kind of divine, you know, gift. I'm God's gift. But it is, everyone's body is a divine creation, which is given to us. I mean, if you think about what goes on in our body, we don't know anything about what happens in our body, right? We don't know how our fingernails grow. We don't know how our food's digested. We don't know how air comes into lungs and goes into the body. That is our divine gift of a body, you know, and we are mental beings that come into these bodies and then decide what to have for lunch, you know, or what job to do, or, you know, what we enjoy doing, what you know, do we design, are we scientific, are we musical? You know, this is what we decide as mental beings to experience in this life. But basically what I'm saying is that everything has the same common denominator, which is an atom, and that atom follows certain rules that I found out from the inventor of my product, the Omnia radiation balancer. And it's fascinating because it tells you how the very building block of the universe, the atom, behaves. And it's all about the spin of electrical current within that atomic structure, which I can go into now if you're interested to hear more.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, great. So So it's difficult to do this without a sort of graphical aid. But if you just picture a donut, right? A donut has a ring around it, and on the inside is empty space. And that is exactly what our blood cells look like. If you do a live blood analysis on blood in 2D, you just see these donut shapes, right? And on the middle of that, there is empty space. And what the scientists that I work with has found is that in the middle of that empty space, there is a point, a still point, a tiny point, a magnetic point of zero electrical potential, right? So the importance of discovering that is that is the magnetic field. That is effectively the only magnetic field in physics. And what it does is it holds the ring of light in balance around it. And that ring of light, that donut torus field of light, basically dives into the magnetic point to pull out the energy to spin itself, and it spins into matter, and then it discharges itself into the ether, and it spins and it discharges, spins and discharges. So that's the relationship between the light ring and the magnetic still point in the middle. And that still point is giving birth to all light rings in existence, whether it be in this wall or in my body or in this phone, etc. Right? So understanding that spin and discharge, so compression and then expansion, compression, expansion, that is frequency. That the rate at which it oscillates between the making of the atom and then the discharge of the atom is frequency, and that is what's governing everything in existence in this table, in my body, like I said, and in the walls, right? So this is fascinating, because once we understand how the atom behaves and how important it is that light ring is held in balance in a perfect donut around the centered 0 point, is vital to what, it is vital to how my solution works, right? Because what we found is that within the radiation field, we have a lack of balance between the compression and the expansion, which means that it's an agitated electrical wave field. And what happens is, because we are beings of energy, frequency, and vibration, we respond to everything that we come into contact with. I'm responding to you right now. I respond to sunlight. I respond to good music, good food, a hug, walking on the beach. All of these things are positive resonant effects in our bodies. But we respond in exactly the same way to toxins or things that are in dissonance with the human body. We pick up the imbalance in their wave field, right? And that is effectively what is happening with phone radiation and wireless radiation. We pick up electrically the imbalance in that field. And it would be the same if, I walked behind a bus, right? With all the car fumes, I'd be like holding my nose, because all of those electrically imbalanced car fumes, toxins, would be coming through my nose and into my body. So I would actually stop that from happening by holding my nose and holding my breath. And what we're saying is that exactly the same effect on a subtle level at the moment with 4G, but it's about to get a lot stronger with 5G. On a subtle level, that electrical challenge is happening to our bodies. But guess what? We can't smell it. Like the fumes behind the bus, we can't smell it. We can't see it, right? So the challenge is, how do you prove it? And that's when I sort of made a little bit of a breakthrough in terms of my company and building my brand, is that I developed 4 tests, or I just incorporated 4 tests. I didn't dream them up myself, but I incorporated 4 tests which show clearly that there is a problem caused by phone radiation, and then that we have the solution which reverses those problems. So I can go in a little bit more into what the tests were, if that interests you.
Yeah, it's always good. Definitely. I think it's important for people to hear about what kind of testing's been done. I just wanted to say that, like, when I first got an iPhone back in 2008, 2009, and switched it on and had it on 3G and Wi-Fi, I felt for the first time, I was really conscious that I felt there's a slight dull pain in my hand when I'm using this thing. It was just very slight and very subtle, but I was just aware, God, I can actually feel this. This is palpable. And I hadn't had that before. And then every single phone since then, I've noticed it. And the other thing I'll say is that I've got your patch, your Omnia patch, and I've got that on my phone, and I definitely notice a difference that I don't have that dull pain that in my hand when I'm using it.
Brilliant.
Interesting.
I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, that for me, you know, it's very difficult to show that you've changed the state and the balanced spin of a radiation field because it's invisible. So what we have to do is use the human body to show that the human body is now reacting positively to, you know, symptoms that you had before. Now, there are people who are electromagnetically hypersensitive. EHS is a thing, you know, and they can't.
I met someone. I had a friend when I was in India who had that, and I was total nightmare. But I was like, is this a mental health thing or is this real? And I was still debating in my mind, but I knew enough to know that it could be real. So yeah, please say more about that.
Well, I think it's real, but then it can be conflated by the individual potentially. I mean, I don't want to get in, you know, I don't want arrows coming in at me left, right, and center. But look, it's very, very real for the people who suffer from it, right? I know people who use chopsticks on a keyboard. You know, that's how bad it is. They can't touch this stuff, and they feel it instantly. And the thing is, they're super tuned in. They're very, very hyper aware. They're very sensitive to everything. So these people everyone's different, right? Everyone is, you know, to try and say that we're all the same is silly. You know, we're all different body weights, emotional makeups, fitness levels, all sorts, right? Blood types, you name it, diets. So we're all different. And, you know, I've sat with people and spoken with many, many people who are electromagnetically hypersensitive. And yes, they do notice a difference. And other people have tingling in their ears or something down their neck or something like that. And that tends to disappear once, you know, you put the product on the phone, which is great. And then I do a whole load of the tests. But to just go back to your point about, you know, the first iPhone, that was a considerable step up in, you know, in radio frequency transmitted to a phone. But even before then, remember, I'm showing my age here or whatever, but the old Nokias, they used to make such a noise that you just knew that there was something wrong with that. It was like, you know, and they used to buzz and jump off the table and stuff. And you knew that wasn't good. That was not, that you just had that intuition that it wasn't good for you. And what the handset manufacturers have done is spent a lot of time and effort and money to make these things as quiet as they possibly can. You know, the only thing that we notice sometimes is that they get hot, and people don't like that heat, and they're right not to like that heat. But there's something other than heat which is causing the heat, which is this imbalanced energy within the radiation field. So the way that we test, other than, you know, I mean, it's a little bit subjective saying, oh, I felt a tingle there and whatever. It's difficult to replicate and so on. So
of course,
what we've done,
because it's placebo as well.
There sometimes it's not there other times, and so on. So look, I will continue doing every test that I find out about to prove that you know, what I'm saying is true. But for now, what I've done is we do a live blood analysis where we take a baseline, no exposure to electromagnetic frequencies, and then I watch a video for 20 minutes, and we take another live blood analysis. And basically, all your blood should be circular and separate from each other in the sample. You know, it should be bobbing around like this, or probably against my black background like this. You know, separation in between each cell. And then after 20 minutes of watching a video on my phone, which is a lot of radio frequency because of the data, the video that's coming through. The whole sample stuck together, like everything stuck together. All the blood cells basically clumped together, right? Which is not what you want in your body, because that means it's harder for each blood cell to move through the capillaries. It's harder to serve oxygen to each of those blood cells. And this is a 20-minute, almost instant reaction, electrical reaction in the blood that we can observe very, very clear, very easily. That test could be done by Public Health England or any phone industry or whatever else, right? This is very, very easy to do. So that's the first test. And then obviously we put our patch on the phone and did another test, and it went back to normal, where the blood cells were separate and in their own space. And that syndrome is called Rouleau syndrome in the blood. And it doesn't just happen because of mobile phones. It can happen for a number of different reasons, toxins and stress and other things. But, to take a sample where everything's normal, and then the only thing you do next is watch a video for 20 minutes, and for it all to clump up like that is not good news. And then reversing that with our patch was the first test that we did. I also took it to a kinesiologist, several kinesiologists, and they use the body's strength and muscles and alignment to see whether you are sensitive to something or not. And I first found out about kinesiology when I was 13, because it turned out that I was allergic to milk, right? So what they do is you hold your arm out like this, and they pull down on your arm, and you're super strong. They keep putting different things in your hand, and then they put something in my hand, and I just went like this. I was like, what is that? I've got no strength left. And it was milk. And from then on, I haven't drunk milk. Well, I've tried to stay away from it as much as I can, because I know I'm sensitive to it. So 100% of people go weak with a phone in their hand. 100%. And, you can argue about kinesiology all day long, because some people do, some people just, it's not scientific enough for them.
What about if the phone is off? If the phone is switched off, have you done that?
It still has some kind of reaction. And the reason is because phones, even if they're off, are in the set because of the resonant effect, right? You'd have to have all phones removed from literally a radius of about, a couple of 100 meters. Because what a phone does as an electrical thing is it picks up the vibration of any other phone that's in the same frequency band as it, right? So even if your phone's off, only on a very weak level, but still it will be there, your phone will start to resonate and vibrate in sympathy with all the other phones around you, right? Even if your phone is off. So
is that due to the antenna on the phone?
Yeah. And just energy, frequency, and vibration, and yes, just the fact that. So let me give you an example. 2 guitars, right? And you put them next to each other, right? The guitars have got 6 different strings, right? And you pluck one of the guitar strings on one guitar, and the other one you don't do anything to that. What happens to the other guitar?
Yeah,
the same string will start to pick up the vibration and start to vibrate in what they call sympathetic resonance, right?
Yeah.
You didn't pluck it, you didn't do anything to it. The vibration of it was picked up because it's in the same frequency band. None of the other strings, and then in the same frequency band. And that's exactly electrically what happens to our bodies when we walk into radiation fields. All of the radiation in our bodies, because our bodies are electric too, therefore they are radiating. We go into a radiation field that's imbalanced, that's an agitated wave field that's not centered and not, doesn't have a 0 point dialed into the geometric center. We're going to talk about that later. But you walk into some of those fields with agitated energy, you pick up that agitated energy and your body starts to behave differently. You pick up the vibrational pattern of that radiation field. And that is the new information I'm here to share with everyone, including the telcos, because they can be forgiven for not knowing this, because it's kind of new science. It's new science about the electricity in the human body, but also the electricity in the atom itself. and it exists in every wave field, whether it's a radiation wave field or a human body's wave field. But the problem is that as organic beings, we're the ones that come off worse when we encounter the radiation field, because our bodies rely on positive, well-balanced electricity to function. So the kinesiology test is something that I do with people just to get the conversation started, mainly because it's the only one I can do for free. You know, we say, you take everything out of your pockets, do a test, see how strong you are, see if you're strong. Now put a phone in your pocket and then see what happens. And, you know, people go weak, and then we put our patch on and then they go super strong again. And 100% of people I've tested go super strong. So that gives me confidence that I'm giving some benefit to the world. And then the last two tests we do, one is on the structure of water, but it's probably could be a bit too woo-woo for most people. But ultimately, when you expose your phone with our patch on it to water, and you make a phone call next to the water, and then you freeze the water, and then you do a process called liquid crystal photography, it comes out perfectly structured and crystalline. So it looks like a snowflake, which means that the resonance in the water has organized itself into the perfect sacred geometric shape of water. And that's good news for your body, because your body is over 70% water, right? And your blood is 90% water, right? So that's the water crystal photography. And then the last test that we do is on, which I've only just done, and I've only done it on myself, is on heart rate variability. And basically there's some really cool technology in Russia, which I hope will be very common knowledge soon. They originally invented it to test their astronauts, right? So they wanted to check that the people they put up into space were the fittest, most electrically balanced, and, you know, everything in their body was just like perfect, so that they didn't waste 15 years of investment on this person going up into space. They wanted the person to be electrically perfect, you know, the perfect specimen, if you like. So they built all this technology to measure the heart rhythms and the stress levels in the body, and then put these astronauts under duress and see who responded best, right? So they've got all this technology called heart rate variability systems. And I go in and have a baseline, and it basically says your stress levels are here and your electrical energy levels are here. And then again, I watch a video on a phone for 15 minutes, and the stress levels go right up and the electrical energy levels go right down. And that's just after 15 minutes. So these are tools that we can use to show what's happening in the human body. And then when we put our patch on, they went back to normal, right? So we know that by changing the spin of the electrical current of the radiation field and setting it back to what we call a centeredness and a balance, then that radiation field can be kind of like the sun, which is a balanced field, which is the giver of all life, because not all radiation fields are bad for you, right? Some radiation fields are good for you. And as I mentioned earlier on, the human body is also radiating because we are electrical beings. So there's a radiation process in our bodies. So I think the issue that we have in general, the macro issue, is that mainstream medicine looks at the body in terms of blood, flesh, bones, and chemicals. And we're looking at the body in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And we're finding that there's a problem. And that problem has been backed up by 10,000 peer-reviewed studies on rats that show, yes, it's confirmed there's also a problem in rats. And when the rats have a problem, we should listen to that too. And then the bottom line is that information should be made mainstream. It should be common knowledge for anyone using a phone. And then we all need to open up how we're going to solve this together, you know, because ultimately going from 4G to 5G is a big step up in terms of the intensity of that radiation field and how quickly it could have an effect on us.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you're probably familiar with this, because I've seen this in a couple of videos, that experts who are talking about mobile radiation and saying that in your settings of your phone, you can find the legal kind of advice or health advice saying this phone should not be more than 1 inch close to the body for health reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a touch phone.
They certainly don't tell you that down at the Vodafone shop.
Yeah, and you know, look, I don't want to get too drawn into the whole, I want to try and stay friends with the phone industry if possible.
Sure.
Because I feel like our solution is something that's really valuable to them, right? If we all understand the real physics behind radiation and the real physics behind your human body and why, when those two clash, that there's a problem, then we can all collectively say, you know what? We tried to give you these amazing phones with amazing, capabilities, but we didn't realize that they were harming. That's the situation that I'd like to see. We're so sorry we didn't realize because we didn't have the right physics, right? But the reason, I can tell you very briefly, the reason why they changed their terms and conditions is because the phones are getting more and more and more and more powerful, right? And there is this thing called the specific absorption rate limit. Now, I spoke a bit earlier on about the fact that there are non-thermal effects of a phone, but there are also thermal effects of a phone if it gets beyond a certain heat, as there would be for anything that you put in your pocket that was hot, right? They could measure whether that sustained amount of heat would then do damage to the body. So when they do their test on the plastic skin with the fake blood in the middle, and they put the phone next to that plastic skin, they're only measuring for heat transfer into the body. And the phones became more and more and more sophisticated because we asked them to do this, right? I asked to speak to you on a phone over wireless, so we could share this on Facebook, on social media, and people could like it. And we asked for this. So we have to take responsibility for this ourselves. We can't just go, oh, it's them, it's the phone industry, it's it's Public Health England or whatever. It's us. We all need to make ourselves aware of this and find the right solution that everyone agrees is right. And that's why I set this company up, because I felt that I had something that was half decent. So the phones got more and more powerful, and they started to give us the wrong readings in terms of safety, because there is a governing body called ICNIRP, the something Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. And before phones got really sophisticated and had apps on them and video, if you can even remember that far back, there was a time when they didn't have all of that stuff. And this body called ICNIRP said, well, we think the safe levels is this, right? And then the phones started getting more and more and more sophisticated. And suddenly all the phones were going way over that level. So what they had to do is put a tiny space between the plastic skin and the phone, so that just that tiny bit of space reduced the heat significantly. And then they changed all of their terms and conditions in the phones to say you must hold your phone 1.5 centimeters away from your body at all times, and you have signed these conditions, terms and conditions, to say that you will do that. And it's a touch phone. How are you going to not touch it? So it's a bit crazy, but that is effectively where we lie. That's where we stand right now. I'm just here to tell you the truth. I don't want to be the one that's pointing fingers, but everyone has got to register that and realize that we're in this together. Not only are we being affected, but we need to all work out what the solution is.
But surely a bit of heat, I mean, I'm not bothered. I burn myself on the stove, and that's well, I'm not worried about my health because of that. So I'm curious about that side of it. Like, how is the heat from a phone affecting one's health?
Yeah, well, I would just say that there is something other than heat that is causing the damage. So there are non-thermal effects and thermal effects. So to some extent, the SAR, the whole SAR, is a little bit of a misnomer, but I don't want to I don't want to sort of stop that debate from happening.
What do you mean by SAR?
Sorry, SAR is the only safety test standard that exists on mobile phones. It means specific absorption rate, SAR, of heat. So what they've worked out is that when tissue absorbs heat at a certain level, then it damages the tissue and therefore the human body. They have worked that out,
Wow.
right? So even though you say bit of heat, no problem, the point is if you put that heat next to your body over, weeks, months, that might cause an effect. Like when you put your hand on a stove, it's immediate because it's so hot. But if you have a sustained amount of heat over a period of time, that can also chip away at the body's balance, right? So the SAR was dreamt up as the term, and everyone's phone has an SAR rating, right? You can look this up. You can just look up SAR rating for my iPhone or my Samsung Galaxy, whatever it is, right? You can look it all up online. These are the governing safety standards around phones, all about SAR, all about heat, not thinking about anything non-thermal, right? And what we're saying is that before the heat actually gets generated, there is an imbalance in the radiation field and the way it spins. And when that gets more and more frenetic, then you get the heat. But even when it's not frenetic, you get the imbalance. So there's like two different registers of the type of damage you can do. One is non-thermal and one is thermal. So one is to do with heat and the other one's non-thermal, which confuses the hell out of all the biologists because they're not working from the right concept of the atom, right? They're not understanding that it's the spin of electrical current within the atom that's doing damage to the spin of electrical current in the rats' bodies, right? So, on one level, you're right in that you were going to saunas, we go into sunlight and it's hot. We expose, we're going to a hot bath, right? We expose ourselves to heat, a lot. But I do bow to the experts on this, which is that if you were to put something in that causes a certain type of microwave radiation heat, which, as we know, sort of has a reputation for cooking us from the inside, then that can be dangerous, and that's what they've worked out. So I will just say that I think they're right about that. Even though it's sort of a little bit illogical, I think they're right to set a standard at a certain amount of heat and just say let's not go above that.
So it's not necessarily. So the heat, the way the phone heats up, when you touch the phone and it's hot, that is due to microwave radiation, is it?
Yeah, all radiation that hits your phone is microwave radiation. That is what it is. It's what else? What other words are there for it? They call them electromagnetic frequencies as well, but that frequency is just a speed. Frequencies are not a thing. Frequency is a description of the speed of the wave field, right? The speed at which the electrical current is moving, or as we say, compressing itself into matter and discharging, compressing, discharging.
But like as for example, electronics have processors in, right? And like my computer, right? It's got a fan on, and it's heating up because the processors are getting hot. So that is, to me, that seems to be a different kind of thing than a microwave radiation reason for why the thing's getting hot, if you know what I mean. So I'm like, in terms of the phone getting hot, it's not, I don't know enough to know, but I'm asking you, like, is the phone getting hot because it's the processes in it are akin to the ones in the computer, and because they're working overtime, that's why it's getting hot? Or is it something else that's making the phone hot?
No, that is what makes a phone hot. You turn a phone off, it's never going to get hot. You turn a phone on, and what happens with the phone is that there's two things. You can either ask for data, right? So opening up an email is asking for the data to come through to you, or even opening up a YouTube video is asking for data to come into the phone. That's one way of increasing the radiation and increasing the energy that comes into the phone. And energy just morphs into heat ultimately. But the other one is all of the processes going on in the background that just poll for data. Just go, give me data. Like your weather app is saying, give me data all day, and your email apps as well are actually in the background saying, have I got any new email? So your phone, you can try this. I've got a video on my site about this. You put your phone down and then you put your radio frequency meter next to it, and then you turn your phone on, right? And your radio frequency meter will go from like close to zero, right? As soon as you put your phone on, all of the apps in your phone start looking for data. Give me data, give me my Facebook, give me my Instagram, give me everything, right? Over Wi-Fi, over Bluetooth, over a cell tower, everything. And all of that pulling of data into the phone creates massive amount of energy, right? And that energy, when it gets too much and the phone can't handle it, like there's a log jam of data trying to get into the phone, that's when the heat starts, because and that's when you recognize it, that's when you realize it. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason for why the phone gets hot. Sometimes you're just going into a bad signal area and they're trying to deliver all of your apps are asking for all of this data, and that whole I can't get a signal puts pressure on the, and that's why heat develops in the phone. So it's so difficult to say why it happens, but it's just a number of reasons.
Right. So the heat could be parallel with microwave radiation levels, or it might not be.
Well, we know that it isn't as we know the same technology is used in microwave ovens, or the same range of frequencies is used in microwave ovens, but obviously that that you can't compare the types of heat that you get. I think what the issue is that you're thinking of microwaves and you're thinking microwave ovens, right? You're thinking that level of heat. Of course you don't get that level of heat, otherwise all our tissue would be deeply fried. But I think what they're saying is it's the same type of wave field, right? The microwave radiation, that is just the type of radiation that we're talking about at extremely low frequencies, right? So it's about the term for the wave field is microwave radiation, but then you've got the frequency of at which it operates, which is important, right? So the frequency of the microwave oven is higher than it is for the phone. But what we do know is that the phone can actually cause a sort of slow cooking effect within the brain, right? Because, this is what happens with microwave ovens, is that you put frequency in the oven and then it cooks the food from the inside out. If you've ever undercooked some food in a microwave oven, you might find that the outside is cold, but the inside is hot, right? And that same effect.
I don't use them, so I wouldn't know.
I don't either. I'm reminding myself of the days I used to, but that's what I'm told. Lots of people say this, so I think it's true. That food microwaves heat food from the inside out. The same thing is happening with a phone going into your brain. Is that the frequencies are going to start to create a lot of heat and hotspots inside the brain. And that has been measured. People have actually measured that hotspots develop within the brain from using a phone, right? Wow. Inside, which you cannot feel, because there's no sensor inside the brain that picks up that hotspot, right? If you had a sensor for it, you would never use your phone, I swear, right? So here's the thing. This is all about evolution, right? We've only had phones, and this will be a massive surprise to some of the younger viewers. We've only had phones since like the early 90s. Before then, we had to actually turn up to places on time, and we used a landline and stuff. So we've only had this, let's say, for 30 years, 35 years. Have we exposed ourselves to this level of radio frequency? So our body is still like teaching itself to pick this up. And when we mentioned electromagnetically hypersensitive people earlier on, we should be listening to them, because we're all going to get into that state at some point, you know.
They're like
because we
the
are
canaries in the
beings.
coal mine.
They are. They're the flag bearers and everything else. Yeah. So that's what's happening. There could be they've proven in many tests that there's a cooking effect that goes on inside the brain.
Wow.
If you put your phone next to your brain for an hour or whatever, and this is bad news for people who work in sales, for example, who spend their whole time on the phone, because that frequency is going directly into the brain. The brain is very, very moist, and we know from our tests that water is the conductor of this radiation. So areas that are excessively moist, like your gut and your brain, are very, very high risk areas. And that's why a lot of colon cancers are going up through the roof, because people put their phone in their back pocket and it goes straight up, you know where, and into the bowel, you know, and that's bad news. And, you know, these are all things that we should be, making ourselves aware of.
Right. And so, I mean, with the 5G technology, is that just amping things up? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's first of all, it's a huge range of wavelengths and microwave frequencies. So it goes 4G had a limit of 2.6 gigahertz, right? So it only went up to that in terms of the power density, and then 5 is going from 2.6, but it's also consolidating all of the numbers below that. So the first phase of this rollout is actually consolidation, like providing a lot more 4G. That's what the first phase of 5 is.
Okay.
But then in next stage, they're going to start putting it in the lampposts, and that's when the real big danger comes from my research, right? Which is, and you can follow other people like Mark Steele, who's very hot on this topic, because that is when you get what we call a millimeter wave, right? Which is a very tightly packed, very fast wave, right? Whereas what we've got on 4G is a big loopy wave, and that travels a lot further, right? Like radio. You know, 4G masts will transmit over miles and miles, right? But the shorter waves are much more densely packed, much higher intensity electrical fields, and they don't travel as far because they run out, you know. But that tightly knit, intense millimeter wave technology is gonna harm us quicker. And like I've said earlier on, there's a senator called Senator Blumenthal, and you can look this up on YouTube. He's lined up Verizon, AT&T, and everyone and said, how much did you spend on safety testing 5G? And they all said $0. And that is negligence beyond compare, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you wouldn't get into that car without it being safety tested, right? And what they're saying is that they're relying on the body that I mentioned earlier on, ICNIRP, and another body called the FCC, the Federal Communications something Commission. They're relying on them to say, as long as it's like this, it's safe. But the phone industry itself didn't do any testing. So we're in this really strange situation where every single person on earth has a phone that is it's not tested, and they're rolling out 5G without any testing. And it hasn't happened anywhere else in the history of product rollout, I don't think. You know, they've even safety tested rockets to make sure that they're unsafe. You know, they test, everyone tests everything, right?
Of course.
Except for, so why should 5G be different? I mean, the whole European Union was set up based on testing vegetables and how big they were and whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm being facetious, but you get the point, right? Which is that we can't allow zero safety testing to be done, right? That is unacceptable. So
you've got a solution, haven't you?
Yeah, we do. We have a solution, and it works extremely well. Like I said earlier on, it passes the heart rate variability test, the kinesiology muscle test, the water structure test, and live blood analysis. And those four, I continue to look for other ways to test. But basically, we have a sticker. It looks like this, and basically you peel that off, and it contains what we call conscious energy, which is going to be a new concept for many people. But like I said earlier, I do test it all the time, and it works extremely well. And so once that's applied on a phone, then it meets the radiation field. And it's almost like if I were to draw a radiation field like this, the 0 point in the radiation field would be moving around and never settling in the middle. And what it does is it tells that 0 point to get back into the geometric center. And once that radiation field is centered and the 0 point is right in the geometric center of the field, then that radiation field is in resonance with our body. It's actually not going to cause any dissonance or harmonic imbalance within the body. It basically is of the same vibrational pattern as the electrical current in our cells. These are all very, deep dive quantum physics concepts. So what I urge people to do is look at our YouTube channel, Omnia Balance, and they can see all of the test results, all of the scientific reasoning for the people who want to deep dive into the quantum physics of this. But ultimately, yes, we do have a means by which we can return any radiation field of any intensity back to centeredness and balance, so that they're not stressed by the phone, by the Wi-Fi router, by the car, by the laptop, by the smartwatch, and all those things. Yes.
Great. Yeah. So I've dropped a link. I believe I've dropped a link in the description for the live. If it hasn't gone in, I've done it through the streaming platform. So if it hasn't gone into the Facebook Live, I will drop it in the comments as soon as this live is finished. And I'm also going to be posting this on YouTube as well. So that's good. And dropping a comment there, dropping the link there, so people can go and check out the site and the product. Anything else you wanted to share?
Well, obviously, it's all been a bit doom and gloom, this, but I just wanted to sort of end on a happier note, right? Because I'm not an all doom and gloom person myself, but me neither. The opportunity here is fantastic, because we can learn a lot more about our bodies, learn a lot more about electricity, and also the unit of energy that we put in this patch is actually the precursor to free and limitless energy. There is energy within this patch, which challenges most people's understanding, because they think energy must be a plug, a cable, and then everything else. But what we're saying is that there's electrical current in everything, like everything around us. And once we understand that, we can actually start to build new solutions, electrical solutions, on this earth that don't harm the planet, don't screw us up, and are a little bit more free for everyone. Although I've got to be careful there, because as soon as you start talking about those sort of things, again, the internet police come out and start, and start shooting you down. So, but I don't care about that anymore. I stand for solutions. I stand for harmony in the body, harmony in the ecosphere, and solutions that benefit us all rather than the tiny 1%. That's what I stand for. And this is an opportunity to find out more about how to do that, and also to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. Nice way of rounding it off. And absolutely, this is, the solutions are here, and they, it's about embracing them and sharing the knowledge and getting people interested and excited about that these solutions exist, and that we don't have to just put up with what's out there, the technology that's out there, that's at times 100 years old, or is, hasn't advanced that much, and the paradigms have changed, and the technology is there, and like what the science of what your product is based on is I find it fascinating, and it links in with a lot of my own research into geometry, unified physics, and it makes a lot of sense. I'd love to know more about this physicist and what he's doing now, and does he write books? Is there stuff in English that one can check out? And is he working on other other inventions and that kind of thing?
Yeah, he's written a book all about Deca energy, or it's called Deca energy because it basically it's in the shape of a dodecahedron, so a 12-sided pentagon. So each pentagon has 5 sides, and there's 12 of them conjoining to form this dodecahedron shape, which is a very strong, resilient, robust shape. It houses all of the platonic solids. But in this dodecahedron, which is basically a unit of energy that has only arrived in our atmosphere for since 2007, I think, he goes out and magnetizes it and finds it, and then he can program it to do what he wants it to do. But in this dodecahedron, there are 12 cones of spinning light. So on each side of the dodecahedron, there's light that goes into the middle and then interchanges, right? So that light is bouncing back and forth, 6 pairs of these spinning cones, and that light never runs out. So we have a unit of energy which never, ever expires. And if we can program it to do what we want it to do, then eventually we can start turning light bulbs on and running cars and all sorts of other things. And we can do it with our mental desires and powers, which is a bit too much for most people right now. But ultimately, I compare our technology to the 1980s, when I might have told you, Jody, I don't know, you probably would have been about 2, right? But I was a bit older than that. But I would have said to you, oh yeah, by the way, in 30 years' time, we're going to be pulling out phones from our pocket which have no wires on them and connect to a cell tower and bring in the Man United game so I can watch that. And you just said in the 80s, you just said, Tim, you've been on drugs, you're completely nuts. I'm doing the same thing now by saying to you that in 10 or 20 years' time, if we want it, we can develop solutions without any cables, without any wires, without any electricity grid, where we control what happens in our environment in terms of heating, lighting, fuel, etc. We can do that. That's what I'm here to say. And I want that to happen, right? And that is, now is the time to reflect. Right now in lockdown, when we're basically not seeing a plane in the sky and we're hearing the birds and we're going, oh, hold on, there's this whole planet here that we've been neglecting for a long time. Now is the time to reflect on what we want to see in the future, what we want to create, what environment we want to create, what it is to be a human, and all those things.
Yes.
There you go. I can't say anything more than that.
Yeah. Well, you've already said a lot. That's a lot. That's wonderful. Yeah. And that's a heartwarming, I think, message for the future, really, and for all of us to take in and ruminate on, and know that the solutions are there, and that there's the future is bright if we want it to be.
If we want it to be, we can either just go back after lockdown and go back straight into the same old, patterns and, oh yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, or we can actually come back and go, you know what, I've been thinking during the lockdown, it might be time to make some changes, in terms of the way we treat the human body for disease, in terms of the way that we, listen to our media, maybe, in terms of what we found out about 5G and the human body and what that's really doing to it, etc. And it goes on and on and on. And to actually say, right, enough of that, let's move into this.
Yeah. May it be so.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah. Let's make it happen. And if you're out there and you love this, then please share it. please share it on whatever resources, social media you have, so more people can hear this message and understand that there are solutions and we can choose our future. So yes, and on that note, yeah, Tim, thank you so much for coming and having a chat with me. It's been wonderful. Okay, well, I couldn't. Your voice went out there, but I imagine you said some nice things.
Thank you, and yeah, see you again soon.
Yeah. Okay, Tim. Thank you so much. Take care, and bye, everyone. Take care.